So I am joined today with my friends, colleagues, co-conspirators in raising capital for awesome projects. I have Amanda White and I have Tom Linfield. So first I'll just introduce myself and then I'll introduce Amanda and then of course Tom. So my name is Carrie Sanders and I am the CEO and founder of Hope Community Capital. We have been in business for almost 5 years and our focus is to help nonprofit mission-oriented organizations raise capital, particularly loans and equity and tax credits for facilities that they are building. And we have a particular focus on working in communities that may be under-resourced or lower income communities, and that these projects are really amplifying the assets that are already present in those neighborhoods. Those are our key clients, and that is our passion. We work across the United States, but we do have a good amount of projects here in Wisconsin. I'm joined with Amanda White. Amanda White is CEO of Amanda White Consulting, and she has been working for at least 20 years to advance the capacity of nonprofits to grow and to do good in their community. She focuses on capital campaign management, coordination, feasibility, annual and major giving, and also does an amazing job at creative messaging. So we'll hear from her after me this morning. And then I'm also joined by Tom Linfield. So Tom is the Vice President of Community Impact at the Madison Community Foundation, and he has more than 25 years of experience in the nonprofit world. He has focused on arts, he has focused on higher education, public television, and community grant making and grant writing. In his current role at the Madison Community Foundation, he coordinates all competitive and field of interest grant making. He offers capacity building, counsel, and facilitation to nonprofits, and he serves on the leadership team for the foundation. So I am joined by two colleagues, co-conspirators, as I said, and we are all committed truly to building the capacity of the nonprofit sector to make impact in our communities. With that, we'll get started. So I'm going to share my screen. While I do that, I'm going to also point out that there is a Q&A opportunity. And so if you have a question, we do have an opportunity to answer some of those questions at the end of the presentation. And you would simply go to the bottom of your screen and you'll see a Q&A button, as it were, and you can put in your question. I and the other panelists will see those questions. And if we don't have an opportunity to answer those today, I'm certain we can get back to you as a follow-up. Okay. And with that, I will share my screen. Okay. All right, so just a roadmap for what we're going to be doing today on the webinar. I just offered a welcome, so welcome, and our panelists' introductions. I will give a short presentation followed by Amanda White and then followed by Tom Linfield. Then there's an opportunity for questions and answers from participants, attendees, that's you. And then we're going to hopefully carve out just a few minutes for what I'm calling end notes, which are just some key conclusions, some key points that we hope that you can take away from this short 75-minute opportunity to address raising capital in uncertain times. So there we are, you just met us. So for my presentation, my portion, I'm going to offer a to-do list. And my specific audience is nonprofits who are engaged in capital raising for a project, such as a real estate expansion, such as a new facility, such as another location. So really looking at those nonprofits who are engaged in building, developing, dreaming, pursuing a community facility. So I've created a to-do list that my clients are in various stages of undertaking at this point. And we're separating it into, we should be doing this right now. These are my recommendations to do right now, soon, and then future. So I'm going to go through those slides. And the idea that underpins this is that we are in a turbulent time around raising capital for these projects. And so what can we be doing as nonprofits to ensure that we are planning as much as possible and preparing as much as possible to continue the impact that we had planned before we are experiencing a global health pandemic? So how can we get there? So right now, my suggestion to all of you is to take a pause and understand the current financial picture of your nonprofit and form what many of my clients are calling a strategic group. It's a strategic sort of task force that would include the CEO, the CFO or financial officer or accountant, the development director, board leadership, maybe a leader from your capital campaign, cabinet, and also any third-party advisors. And the idea is that you can bring this group together regularly, and a lot of my clients are doing this weekly, if not more, via Zoom, of course, and creating a strategy about what can we do now, soon, and in the future for our project. So the now checklist includes this. Frankly, what is in the bank? What do we have in the bank right now to sustain our current operations? And what do we have in the bank for that capital campaign that maybe we started? So what is our cash balance right now? What is the current reality? What can we expect to come in terms of financing, money, funding, to come in for operations and for the capital campaign? So I want to distinguish between operations and capital campaign, two things. So what are we expecting to come in? And then when I say when, I'm talking about the next 30 days to 90 days. That's the now, right now. What do we expect around operations and our capital campaign? Do we anticipate any delays in project sources? And this is, again, the facility, that many of my clients are looking to do. They have to create financial sources. They have to raise that capital, right, to fund that facility. What delays are you hearing about from your funders, from your grantors, from foundations that you can anticipate that's going to impact your project development? Another thing we want to do in terms of understanding what's happening now is that we want to understand if we've received any new income related to COVID-19 grants or donations. Many of my clients have been very joyfully and thankfully overwhelmed by the kindness and generosity of our shared community around revenue to support COVID-19 urgent emergency needs. So this is new. This is a new part of the current financial picture, and we need to really get our arms around what that means. And then we also need to, relatedly, on the other side of the income statement, what new expenses or delayed in expenses are you going to be having related to COVID-19? So is there other expenditures you're making because of this uncertain time that we are all experiencing together? Get those listed out is my recommendation. And then, do you have any outstanding debt to lenders, whether it's a bank, whether it's a community development financial institution, whether it's another part of your nonprofit that has lent to you, you're part of the nonprofit? Do you have any outstanding debt or obligations that need restructuring or modification? And I want to give an example of this. We're working with a client who has a lot of affordable housing, right? And during this time, they have found that their tenants have had some delay pay or not pay at all at this time. And so, as you may know, the income from residential rent is what is used by the project nonprofit to pay their debt that supported the construction of that in the first place. So when our tenant income is strained or delayed or not happening at all, that means we've got to have a conversation with the bank. And so that's my thought. What sort of debt do you have potentially? And is there anything that needs to be modified around that? And that means let's go talk to our financier. Let's get a modification plan. And my thought is do it soon and do it often. Now let's move on to soon. So we talked about the current reality. Now I'm going to encourage us to look at soon, which is next, okay? So I have many clients who entire, business model, mission, vision, values were around gathering in place, gathering together. And there are tuition that is being charged for that. There are program fees that are being charged to that contribute to our top line revenue as an organization. This idea of gathering in large groups, delivering large scale programming for a fee, it's changed, right? It's changed. And so in that example, I'm asking you using that example to say, how might your revenue sources change due to this moment we are in? Can we gather still? I think about, my dear arts organizations, and I think about that I work with and that I participate in, I'm a chorister, for example. I think about how can we do concerts? It's heartbreaking, but the thing is, if we can look at that and see a clear picture of how our top line revenue might be impacted, that will give way to creative ways to replace that. So that is my encouragement to you, and that is my recommendation to you. The other thing is, what operating expenses are supportable? What can I pay for now in my organization now that I know my revenue has changed? Maybe it hasn't changed to go down. Maybe it's coming from a different source. But what expenses can I now cover? It's a different picture. And it's important that we project this, which is point number 3. We want to be able to project our operating cash flow for different scenarios. So that's just a lot of words to say, what does our revenue look like in the future given our current situation? What expenses can we support with that revenue? And how are those expenses supporting, the growth of that revenue? What is that? And when I say different scenarios, let's say we are able to gather for performances for which we can charge a fee. Okay, that's one scenario. Let's say we can gather for performances, but we can only ticket half of the seats that we used to. What scenario does that look like? And so that's what that strategic group that I mentioned in my first slide, that's what they are doing. That's what these groups are doing, is really looking at these scenarios from a financial perspective and thinking, what levers are going to change? And what does this mean for my operating sustainability as an organization? And then finally, the future. And this is the exciting part. This is why we are here on this webinar, I believe, because we all know that our nonprofits and our mission still has a future. It still needs to happen. And my colleague Amanda will make this point very clear, that these capital campaigns, these facilities that we are engaged in building, this represents the future impact of your organization. And this is why we're going through these hard realities of what's our current reality, what could our future scenario be, because we want to move into that future where we are building that facility and we are serving our stakeholders the way we were formed and to do. So when we think about the future, again, I cannot emphasize enough, please get that kind of strategic cabinet that is meeting regularly to talk about these things. And so part 1 of the future in my recommendation is that you can build different timing scenarios for the receipt of your capital campaign funds based on discussions with your donors and your contributors. So I know Amanda will share about this, but amongst the clients that I work with, there has been a lot of discussion around, are you still considering supporting our project? If so, what would the timing look like? We're hearing lots of feedback, but my point is that the clients that I think will have that future that we just talked about, that's going to be so amazing, where you can do this impact, those clients are the ones who are in discussion with their donors a lot. right now. Just again, getting a clear sense of the current reality, and just emphasizing that we're still moving forward, but we need to understand the potential delay from our donors and our contributors. I work a lot on helping my clients put together the different sources, and then getting us to the financial closing, right, / groundbreaking. And what I am finding across many asset types, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's performing arts, whether it is a community facility or a health center, the groundbreaking is getting delayed. And I am finding that the reason for that, at least on the structured finance side, remember the debt and the equity, I'm finding the reason for that is that the financiers themselves are experiencing delay. So for example, banks have been extremely focused on the PPP, the Payroll Protection Program. And so I could not even get really any meetings with my core, group of banks and financiers that I typically work with until just this week, because they were working, 12 to 14 hours a day to work on PPP. And so it's been a delay in the conversation, and this is going to delay groundbreaking. I know that. That's just one of the factors. But we need to, again, plan for that future, that we're going to have a delay in the groundbreaking, and what does that mean for the project? And then finally, on part one here, how will groundbreaking delays impact public sources of funds or private grants from foundations? And I'm hoping that my colleagues, Amanda and Tom, can talk about this, because we do have grant cycles. We do have funding cycles, for example, for tax credits. These are annual cycles, and there's sort of a rhythm to how the money gets into projects. And so how is this going to impact those commitments that you may already have from, the city of Madison, for example, city of Milwaukee, for example, the federal government, or private grants and foundations? Important to know that. And then finally, I want to talk about the part two of the capital campaign project, which is that we want to be developing operating scenarios for our new facility, considering the change in operating revenue sources that we talked about earlier. Okay, so what can, and we call it, it's the pro forma, right? It's the future projections based on variety of levers that may change. So these are so crucial. And the thing I want to say about this document is that it doesn't have to be fancy, and it will never be perfect. What it needs to be is dynamic, and it needs to thoughtfully consider, in your spreadsheet, the changes in revenue and how your expenses are going to support that revenue, or how they might change. And during the capital campaign period, something that I'm helping my clients with a lot right now, I think they're finding this to be valuable, is what is the timing of those capital campaign pledges turning into cash? And then also, what is the timing for the construction draws, right? So money going out during the construction project, money coming in to support those construction costs, really projecting and understanding what that looks like. It's good to identify any timing and pricing concerns with debt. So for example, I've had some opportunity to get what we call kind of comfort letters from financiers for projects. And those were pre-COVID comfort letters, which is fine, meaning we like the project, we will underwrite this very seriously, we're very interested in supporting this project. Not a commitment though, I just want to be clear, not a commitment at all. And now that we're in this uncertain time, I'm going back to the banks and asking, how have things changed? And things have changed. There is less capital available. I'm noticing tighter, more stringent underwriting standards than I did prior. And I understand that. I understand they're dealing with a lot of uncertainty too. But the point is, we've got to, as projects who are trying to get done and move forward our facility, we've got to understand how and if those underwriting standards changed. And then here's a hopeful question, and I'm going to end with this. How can the project move forward with its financing and funding partners? And the biggest hopeful question that I see here is that, are there any new project partners that have emerged? Our people our funders, donors, whether that's public, private foundations, have priorities shifted in a direction where there's new alignment with what your project is doing, with your vision and mission and values. I think there's some new stuff that's emerging. An example would be, I work a lot in new market tax credits, a lot. And I try to bring those to my nonprofit facilities that I work with because they are really beneficial to getting the project done. And what I'm noticing in speaking with those who have this new market tax credit allocation is that they are hyper focused, which is wonderful, on projects that are in severely distressed communities that are serving more people than they would have without the new markets. So they're extremely focused on community impact in terms of really impacting people's lives. So I think that's a huge opportunity, and it's a shift. It's a shift that I've noticed for my clients. And so from there, I am going to turn it over to Amanda. I will stop sharing my screen, and Amanda will start sharing hers. And I believe...
Okay. Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. Looks like you can. So yeah, I'm Amanda White, and Carrie gave a great introduction. So the only other thing I'll say is I've been a consultant in the Madison area for about 7 years, and I've worked with 30 plus organizations here. And it's just been a true pleasure and delight to be able to work with so many groups doing incredible work in our community. For those who, for some reason, there we go. And for those of you, I was looking at the registration list and I saw a lot of familiar names on there. So to my friends who are listening, hello and hugs to you. And I hope you're safe and healthy right now. And to those I haven't met yet, thank you so much for taking your time today to spend it with us. And hopefully we can give some helpful advice and hear some great questions here in a moment. So one thing that I've been sharing with my clients is, there's so much uncertainty right now, but the thing that we do know for certain that we didn't know even a month ago is COVID-19 and its impact is here to stay with us for a while. And, this is not going to be the couple months short-term thing that we had hoped for. And so certainly it's hard to know what to plan for right now, but we know that we can plan for it being here and that we need to adjust. Uncertainty is very uncomfortable, and there's so much of it right now. A lot of questions that we can't answer that are impacting our large events, our fundraisers, our bottom line, our ability to serve our clients. And one of the big questions that I think Carrie was talking about, which is so important, is how do I project and plan for 2020 and 2021? It's very challenging, but what we do know is that we have to move forward, as Carrie was mentioning, and I know Tom will be talking about as well. No matter what your mission is, whether you are feeding our families in our community, whether you are housing our most vulnerable neighbors, or whether you're nourishing our souls with art and culture, your mission and your organization and your capital project matter. It matters. So I've definitely suggested to some of my clients that you pause in March and April while we're kind of figuring things out and seeing how this is going to unfold. But now that we do know it's going to be here with us for a while, we can't stop. We've got to move forward. We've got to keep fundraising for our operations and any capital projects that we have going. A few things that we know that we need to keep in mind is donors are giving now. They are giving, and they're giving an incredible amount. I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. We know that our donor relationships are more important than ever, and we need to foster those relationships and care for those relationships. We know that annual giving and capital campaigns are really now overlapping. They used to be more separate asks, but now I'm recommending that people start marrying those. I'm going to talk about that. And the other thing I want you to think about in the very quick 15 minutes that I have for my slides is that this pandemic is going to end. We are going to see the end of this. And at the end, your project can be that beacon, that light, that hope. And that's, I think, a really important message to get across. We know that donors want to help right now and that donors are giving. So I actually found a great article, some information from Fidelity Charity, which is donor advised funds. They've got 250,000 contributors. They polled their donors, and 25% of their donors plan to increase their giving during COVID. And of those groups, 46% were millennials. So it's really the millennials who are saying, yes, we're going to give and we're stepping up, which I think is fascinating. 25% were Gen X and 14% are boomers. And 25%, only 25% said they were going to think about shifting their giving to different organizations during this time. So what that says to us is that our donors who are giving now are willing, no matter what your mission is, if they're loyal donors, they care about what you do, they're willing to give now, and they're not necessarily looking for the emergency funding only. One thing that I always share, so if you've seen any of my presentations, and I think I always share this, I think it's now more important than ever to remember this, is good fundraising is never about the money. And I know that that's maybe hard to hear, as right now things are about the money because so many nonprofits are in crisis mode, looking at their budgets and really, really worrying and losing sleep at night. But when we are working with donors, it's really not about the money. Good fundraising is always about the people involved, caring for each other, having a joint passion for your mission and cause, and you engaging donors and others in the important work that you're doing. That's what fundraising is about. And if you focus on that, the dollars will come. Right now, we know with these key donor relationships, resources are tight, your time is limited, you're putting out millions of fires. We know that your time and resources are limited, so you have to invest it in where it matters most. And where it matters most, whether you're looking at your operating budget or trying to figure out how to move that capital campaign forward, it's in loyal donors and looking at your historical successes. So, you know, we know that our loyal donors are there for us. They're our friends. That's where cultivating those relationships is where you should be focused. And also we need to look at our previous fundraising successes. Has it been an annual appeal? What time of year has that appeal been? What kind of messages resonate? Has it been in planned giving? And should we still consider talking about that and the hope after COVID? There was a question that somebody submitted during the registration process that said, I have a challenge grant for my capital campaign right now for planned giving. Should I continue that right now? And the question is, absolutely, continue it. You've got that opportunity now, and your project, your organization is just as important today as it was 3 months ago. So continue to look at those successes and those opportunities that are in front of you. Again, thinking about those loyal donors and those donors being key to us right now and always. Really what we need is to be focused on cultivating those relationships, managing those relationships. Our donor relationships, which I call friends. Our donors are our friends. They're our allies. They're often our biggest cheerleaders. They're our friends. And what we need right now during this time of isolation, what our community needs right now is just more connection, right? And that's so true within our nonprofits as well. So what I'm encouraging my clients and all of you to do is every week be calling at minimum 2 to 4 of your donors and picking up the phone and saying, hey, it's Amanda with XX organization. I just wanted to call and say hi and see how you're doing during this crisis. And, and hopefully you know something about them. Ask how their kids are doing with homeschooling. Ask, if they're working from home and how's that been going? Do they have Zoom fatigue like all of us do? Our donors are our friends. Treat them like our friends. And when we treat our donors like our friends, it isn't all about us, right? It's not about our updating them and our organization. It's about how they're doing. And the goal here is not getting a gift. The goal here is fostering that relationship, and really focusing on how they're doing. And if we do that well, what we'll be doing is practicing what we call permission marketing, which is especially important during this time of COVID, where we pick up the phone, we say, hey, how are you doing? How are the kids? Are you homeschooling? How is that going? What are you experiencing? And then most likely they will say, well, how is the organization doing? How are you managing? And you say, well, you know, we've had some challenges. I'm not going to lie. This is a really interesting time for our organization, but we've still been able to do X and X programs and been able to still serve this many people. We know that this is more important now than ever. Honestly, this and this program, we've had to cut back a little bit. We've had some struggle and challenges there, but we've been able to adjust and virtually reach out to these clients and these groups. So talk about your successes and the way you've acclimated to COVID to persevere, but also talk about the real challenges that you're facing without making it sound like you're sinking ship, right? Because no one wants to give to a sinking ship. And often what that donor will say is, wow, that's amazing what you're doing in these really difficult times. How can I help? How can I help you? And so in these conversations, you have to be ready to answer that question in a way that helps you. So you can, you know what? I know that you've given and you love this particular program in the past. We actually know that we're in a shortfall of about $50,000 from that program this year. Any gift would really help that program. Okay, that's one example. If they don't ask you how the organization is doing, that's okay. And you say, you know what, gosh, it was great to talk to you. If you have any ideas for, after we get off the phone, if you have any more ideas on how we can continue our important work or what might help, please always know I love to hear from you, and don't ever hesitate to drop me a call. And I wish you well and your family well, because that conversation still helps down the road. And quite frankly, it's the human thing to do right now, right? So permission-based conversations. Talking points, a few things you want to avoid is you want to avoid picking up the phone and saying, hi, so-and-so, I'd love to update you on where our organization is at right now. Nope, we really want to hear from them, right? So I would kind of avoid that. I'd avoid saying, hi, I'd love to talk with you about how you might be able to get involved with what we're doing right now and how you can help. Can we set up a meeting? No, I mean, again, that's making it about you, and you really want to be reaching out to them. And what you really also want to avoid is, my organization is in crisis. We're having trouble staying afloat. We need you now. Can you meet with us? Again, no one wants to get on the sinking ship. So make sure to have that balance between the positive and the challenges that you're facing. If you are having challenges, if you don't feel like you have donors who you know kind of personally and are friends, and you need a different type of introduction, you can simply say, hey, we're living in a different world than we were 3 months ago. We've discussed internally how we're evolving our projects and our programs. I'd love to get your feedback on it. I'm reaching out to folks to just get their thoughts and ideas, and I'd love to hear your ideas too. Again, that's a way we're engaging. We're not talking to them, we're engaging them and building that relationship. I know I only have a few minutes left, Carrie. I'm gonna fly through these remaining slides. We have a question and answer, so if you want me to go in depth into anything else, just let me know during the question and answer. What if you don't have any major donors, or really you feel like you don't have a very significant donor list at all. One is, this is a great time, there's no time like the present, than to start thinking about how to build your fundraising effort. And I know it's hard when you're putting out fires, but now more than ever, we need to be focused on fundraising. So one is the donors that you have had, maybe you just have a short list of 50 donors. Get to know who those donors are. Google them, share the list with your board, ask them who they know, what they know about them, so that you can start to reach out to those folks during this time in a similar way that I just talked about, and focus on those donors who have given more. You also, somebody asked about, do we know about people or organizations, foundations who give to people who love books and want to support books? UW Memorial Library has their grants directory, which I bet many of you are familiar with. Right now, they have that available online, so you don't have to go in person. It's a bit more limited, but you can certainly look that up on their website. Donor Search and other paid services have donor research ability to start expanding your list. GuideStar is another opportunity to do foundation and donor research. So start thinking about how you can find people to start building relationships with. Engage your board, and also do think about sending a strategic appeal right now. So whether you're doing operating or capital, do think about crafting some kind of strategic appeal right now. As I mentioned, combining annual giving and capital giving. So often when we have a capital campaign going, we say to people, keep giving to us annually, and our annual giving, it's important, then make this one-time special gift for our capital campaign. What I'm recommending right now is you try to combine those messages. When you talk to your donors, they say, hey, how can I help you? You can say, you know what? We need this amount for our operating right now, but we also have this incredible project that's going to open a year from now, that's going to be the project the community needs as we emerge out of COVID. We need to finish up our capital campaign for that as well. Would you consider a combined gift that would help us move forward, both in the more emergency situation we have, but also looking hopeful to the future and building our future as well? Try to combine those asks where you can. Have a plan. Carrie talked about this. I thought it was great. Have a COVID plan. One of the first things your donors are going to ask you is, what are you doing? If it's a capital campaign project, how is this project going to live in a COVID world? What are you doing to adjust? If it's your own operations, they're going to wonder how you're living and thriving in this COVID world. Make sure you have that messaging and that plan crafted. Revise your current fundraising and capital campaign plan. It's not going to be the same as it was 3 months ago. Think through that with your board, with your campaign team. Know your revenue shortfall, as Carrie talked about that. Know what your shortfall is. Know how much money you need so that you can craft your fundraising around that. Finally, my last point is 5 really important steps that you can take right now. 1 is get on your schedule to start calling those donors weekly and saying hello. 2, analyze your most successful past fundraising. Focus on the things that are going to be most successful and impactful. If you have had an event, a big fundraising event that you know you do every year, look at taking that virtual. Look at maybe canceling it and investing all that staff time in these other opportunities that we know often result in a bigger impact with a less amount of staff time. I actually think big events, maybe galas and things, are going to be completely different in the future, and that might be a great thing for our nonprofit community. Create your COVID response plan, conduct donor research, take the time to do it, and revise your current fundraising plan. A final thought is just that this too shall pass. We are going to get through this. Lead your organization through this mess. It doesn't have to be perfect. I read a great article a couple days ago about the fact that our jobs as nonprofit leaders is just, we got to get us through it. It might not be perfect. It's gonna be messy, but do the best that you can do, work with your board, and just get your organization through it, and you will, and we will get through it. The last thing I wanted to just share is I'm happy to help. If it would be helpful to have a 30 or 45-minute conversation with me about some of the specific challenges that you're facing, I'm happy to do that just free of charge to help out. No pressure to work with me at all. I also will be emailing the group with my slides and also a sign up if you are interested in a follow-up conversation. So thank you and be well, and I look forward to questions.
Thanks, Amanda. And Tom, we will go to you.
Well, hi, everybody. I was going to say it's good to see you, but I can't see you all. I know how many people are on the list, and I've seen all the names. And as you can well imagine, this is driving me crazy because normally we'd all be in a hall together, and I'd be hugging half of you, and we'd be laughing, and then we'd be planning coffees or lunches. So cheers, good to see you all. There are a lot of memes on the internet about how we need to be kind to introverts. I'm married to one, so I get that. But in this COVID crisis, we actually need to be kind to extroverts because people like me are climbing the walls, not dealing with humans. And I think that's very true of donors as well. We have several donors who are begging to come to our homes or to our offices to see us. So I think the positive thing about fundraising right now is that everybody is in this situation. You are not unique. You are not having struggles. It's a very shared struggle, and anything that you're going through and your agency is going through, individuals are going through, donors are going through, and their companies are going through. So you have common ground. I am looking forward to the day where we look back and say, where were you during COVID 2020? If you're from Boston, you say, where were you during the blizzard of '78? People talk about the Kennedy assassination, the Challenger exploding, et cetera, 9/11. So I hope that we will come through this and look back and share stories. I'm going to talk a little bit about following up on what Carrie and Amanda have said. And I don't think I'm saying anything too surprising today. A lot of you, when we've met one-on-one, to talk about capital campaigns, but everything is kind of emphasized in this COVID crisis. And I'm going to try to look at a few of the silver linings that we have too. So I think the first thing is, I always come to this from the approach that while I work for a foundation, and a third of our grants are capital campaign grants, and I was a fundraiser, so I was raising money for capital campaigns. 80% of your donors are likely to be individuals, 80%. So maybe 15% of your funding will come from foundations, 5% from corporations, and perhaps 1% from events. And I always say that because in my mind, from a strategic standpoint, that is how you should be looking at the time you spend fundraising that. So I wouldn't be putting all your time into working with that one foundation that you hope will save you. I would be, as Amanda was saying, working on those 80% of individuals and cultivating those rich relationships. I often say that I don't know who's happier, the person who gets the gift or the person who gives the gift. And I think that that's a lot of what Amanda was saying, is calling people and really getting a sense of how they are. And they're going to ask you, they care so deeply about what you're doing. And I think that the donors I've talked to are caring much more. They're getting even more proactive in terms of helping the agencies they believe in. And while there wasn't an initial rush to help with basic needs, and I think that's still vitally important, I think that there's also a great sense that, wait a minute, there's arts, there's environment, there's learning, there are other things that are so key. And one of the interesting things I've seen actually is some of these agencies are saying, you know, generally we do arts education, but we're finding that the people that we educate, they're out of school or they've lost their jobs. So now we're getting them gas cards, we're getting them food cards, we're linking them with other agencies. So I think that actually nonprofits take on a really much more important role. And as a nonprofit, you are trusted to do what you are doing, and you're part of a network with many other nonprofits. And I think that kind of creativity and collaboration makes you special in this time. This is a time where people do not trust the government. This is a time where people do not trust leadership, but I do think that people trust good nonprofits. I think they trust you. I think number one, I think you really want to make yourselves, you want to ask yourself the question, are you essential? Is your agency essential? And it should be. And then your discussion of what you're doing and what your impact is, not what you're physically building, but what the impact is now and once your building is open. That's really got to be your key focus. So what are you doing that others don't? How are you collaborating with others to do something really extraordinary? I think many people, when they're doing a capital campaign, they get so wrapped up in the logistics, in the blueprints, in the square footage, et cetera, that's deeply satisfying if you're anticipating living in that space. But I think for donors, what's far more satisfying is hearing what will change. How will the children use this space? How will this be the nature center that does extraordinary things? How will this be a community gathering spot? How many more people will you be able to serve? How many people will have access that never did before? How are you changing lives in the community? That's really got to be the focus. Is not what you are going to do, but what you're going to change. And I think that's really critical. Especially right now, I've talked to probably 200 agencies over the last few months. And one of the things people keep saying is if they're not in basic needs, they say, am I important? Can I even call somebody or will they be upset with me? No, they would love to hear from you. They would love to know that the project that they've supported in the past things. If you're an arts agency, I think your job is to paint a picture of a world without art. I mean, walk past the Overture Center and see it closed. It's so depressing. To know that there are art exhibits or shows that I can't go see, that's upsetting. If you're in the environmental world, you are the solace for so many people right now, right? You can't go anywhere right now, but you can go take a walk in nature. You can commune with nature. So I would use that I would capitalize on that. So if I were doing a Zoom call, I might just go take a walk with my phone and say, look, this is a Labellium trabellius. Let me tell you about it. You know, I don't know anything about anything in nature, but I'd love to take a walk. Give people that experience. Tell them why you're important. Generally, I'd be here with 30 students. We're really excited because next year we're going to be working with the Girl Scouts and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. You've got to be able to paint that picture because normalcy will return. And that's really what you're doing, is inspiring people with the work you are doing right now and the work you will be doing soon. It's really about storytelling. The stories have changed in COVID. In many cases, deepening. I was talking with the Literacy Network, and the Literacy Network serves, several hundred people that they're tutoring, and about 80% of the people that they tutor have lost their jobs. So they've become a hub of information. They've fundraised to help people get food and gas cards. They're connecting them with services, employment services. Their work has gotten deeper, not shallower. They haven't thrown their hands up and said, well, I guess we can't do this. They've also moved to more online and over the phone tutoring. So they are talking about how we are part of a solution and how we are part of a deeper solution. I think that's your message. Your message is, not only are we essential, not only are we doing important work, in this time of crisis, people need us more than ever. That is your message. I'm a big fan. I mentioned painting a picture before. I would say look to the future, right? So that we don't know when it'll open, but the building will open. Okay. If you look at the Frank Lloyd Wright Convention Center, it took 60 years to get built. If you're in the middle of a capital campaign right now, you've probably been involved with it from anywhere from to 10 years based on planning. So you're way ahead of the Frank Lloyd Wright curve, right? Your building will open. I don't think donors are so important the day you open. You know, if you say, oh, we were going to open in September and now it's going to be, you know, spring of next year or something. I think that's just fine. One, everybody understands. I mean, we're living in a world where graduations are canceled. You know, everything we think of as normal in Madison is kind of canceled or virtual. They want you to be the best you can, and I think that's part of your messaging. We don't want to open with 10% of the people. We don't want to open unready. We want to open. Oh, the other thing I meant to actually lead with this is I didn't realize once COVID stopped that construction firms are considered essential. So all the construction keeps going. I think a lot of donors don't know that. So we're involved in some major projects, and some of the people keep sending updates, which I love. So if you are involved in construction right now, send pictures of the people working on the construction site. Send a rough house, half sheetrocked, underpainted photo. People will love it. Your donor, you know, connect personally with the donor and say, just wanted to send you a couple of pictures. The Madison Youth Arts Center, Alan Ebert from CTM, they just did a video, and a few minutes of the video was him standing at the construction site. Here we are, I'm looking down off the second floor. Now I'm kind of a building geek. I used to do construction work. I love that sort of stuff. But what it means is we are alive. Things are happening. People are working. This is the future. This is the dream, right? People are investing in that dream. Very exciting. Fitchburg Public Library a few years ago, they did a time lapse when they built their library. They set a camera up on a building across the street. I don't know if anyone's doing that right now. It's a great idea. You know, these, I mean, it's not the most exciting thing minute by minute, but if you can patch some of that together, it can be very exciting. We've seen a lot of agencies pivot. That's my new word, pivot. One of the things we did was we called every grantee and we said, how are you doing? Tell us where you are and how have your priorities shifted? Because one of the things we always say to people is, don't call us with a fishing expedition. Don't call us and say, I've got 10 ideas. Tell me which one you like. We often say, tell us what your top priorities are. What do you really need to fundraise for? And guess what? Given COVID, that's changed. And our board has been completely, and I've talked with several other foundation boards too, with doing the same thing. They're saying, okay, we gave you $50,000 for your capital project, but you need to spend $25,000 of that actually doing virtual teaching and buying supplies and paying your staff to do the teaching online. Tell us about that. And we've said, I think about a quarter of our grantees right now have pivoted, and we've said, yes, we want them to succeed at doing the work they do. So that's absolutely something that you can explore with your funders. American Girl, which funds performances, they had a lot of grantees calling me concerned that we can't perform an overture, we can't perform in the schools, what should we do? And American Girl said, you tell them, keep the money and put it towards whatever your priorities are, okay? So that's really, really key. Amanda mentioned this idea that about the sinking ship. I think we can all be miserable and unhappy and kick our desks in our own homes with the cameras off. But I think you really want to put your best foot forward. And I had an agency call me early on in the COVID crisis, and I thought, oh, I hope they're okay. The message was, please call me today, which is never a good thing. And the person wanted to say, we have a plan. We've implemented 5 things. We're going to do this virtually. We're building this academy. We're working with students one-on-one. We always have somebody available. We have online tutoring. They were on top of it. They gave a message that said, building schmilding, we are there for people. I think that's just a great message. The last thing I really want to talk about is creativity. And I talk about this a lot. I think one of the silver linings of everything being shut down right now is that hopefully some of you have the time to do things differently. So the things you say, oh, we never have time for that. We don't have time to collaborate. We don't have time for strategic planning. Oh, I keep thinking of having a marketing plan, but I haven't done it. Oh, I wish we could change our database, but we haven't done it. Now's the time to do that. And in terms of creativity, you know, host a virtual tour. Doesn't matter what it looks like. You could walk around an empty field and say, this is where the new nature center is getting built. You know, put some tape on the ground or some spray chalk or something. You can really have fun with this thing. All these Zoom calls we're doing, they're all with each other. They're all with other professional nonprofit people. Bring in a client or two. Have one of your art teachers. Have some of the kids show their artwork. I mean, you've got to imagine a donor and you say, we're going to have 3 kids and they just, you know, we learned to do self-portraits this week and they all hold that up. Or you know, have a few people socially distancing in a fire circle somewhere talking about why are these trees important or how do you recognize this? Or you have a teacher, or you have a client from somebody from the food pantry, or you have a volunteer who's been helping deliver meals across the city. Those are the kind of personal things. Doesn't cost you anything. I think it probably, well, it might intimidate, but it should probably excite some of those people that you get involved. But bring different voices in. Again, it's about the impact. Who are you impacting? Have one of the people who are tutored or tutor. Have a pair, a big brother and you know, big brothers, big sisters. Have one of the pairs talk about what they're experiencing during COVID. I really think that's the kind of personal connection you can make. Rediscover snail mail. Personal letters, personal connections, a picture, a drawing, a way to connect with people. I think we're inundated with email right now, and I will say that connecting with somebody one-on-one, saying, Tom, I just wanted to show you 2 or 3 things, or Tom, here's a picture of, you know, the garden last week and the garden today. Look how it's grown. I think that's much more important if you're trying to build relationships than the blanket emails. Hey, here's the news from our center, and 1,000 people get it. It's not personalized. It's not making a connection with me, and everybody is sending out the e-blast. So be careful not to lean too much on e-blasts. Use creativity in terms of what your agency does. So for instance, you know, we've seen musical organizations where, you know, 4 musicians go sit in a parking lot with their cars and play a quartet. We've seen musicians solo in their home, but make a quartet. My sister did a cello quartet. She's a cellist. She played all 4 pieces and then videotaped it all and put it all together. I was talking with a dance troupe. I've always been fascinated by how dances get designed. Some of them actually get drawn out. So what if you showed some initial drawings, then showed a little initial rehearsal, and then showed a finished piece? That could be a soloist. A lot of the music companies are doing that. The MSO has interviewed a bunch of their musicians, their conductor, people who work for the company. They're telling their personal stories. So you get to go bring people backstage at your organization a little bit. That will give them a completely different view of how you do things. I'll end with a few silver linings. One, hopefully you have, as I mentioned, time to plan. I often say that a strategic plan, the double helix at the center of a strategic plan, is a development plan and a marketing plan. So harking back to Carrie's saying, have a core group, have a strategic group that's working. Now's the time to get those minds together and say, here's what we're going to do. And it may look different. Here's plan A, here's plan B, here's plan C, right? But it gives you specific markers and it gives you ways to delegate to your board. Your board is not your confessor right now. Your board should really be active, working. When Amanda says call 2 to 4 people a week, you can have your board members with you. You can have them doing it alone, but you can be reaching out to a lot of people to talk about your importance. Creativity, fold 1,000 origami swans or cranes, put together, you know, have your volunteers doing work. I really think getting out those more personalized, individualized connections with people is going to help you. And the last thing I'll mention is we've talked with several organizations who said, we weren't intending to do X for 1 or 2 years. This has forced us to do that. So for instance, Madam is going to be doing online teaching now. They were all doing it face-to-face before. A lot of organizations, the Monroe Street Art Center, they've been fantastic. They're sending art kits to every kid every week, a different art kit, and then their teachers can do online teaching. They weren't planning that. They're in the middle of building a building. Think about what that means to those families, that they are doing that kind of attention. That's the kind of creative way to show your outreach, your impact. And my guess is when things go back to normal, they will still be able to work with people who are more distant, who can't make it to Monroe Street. Their teachers will still be getting paid to do online teaching. So I think that's one of the silver linings.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Amanda. Very much appreciate all of those tips. I am looking at the Q&A box and I don't have any questions right now. So I want to encourage that. And so while those questions are coming into Q&A, I am just going to kind of pull out a couple things that I just heard from the three of us. And we'll see if we can just kind of do some end notes here, and I'll keep my eye on the Q&A box, okay? So number one, I kept hearing the word strategic. Strategic. And the other part of that is that we have this blessing now, that we have the time. We have a little bit of time to focus on the strategy. And I am really focused on the financial strategy. Tom, you mentioned marketing and development as well. This is an opportunity. And we had talked about that core group that we can get together to make this strategy happen. That's great. The word cultivation came up a lot. Amanda spoke in depth about the cultivation. And the other thing I would say regarding cultivation is we were not just discussing capital campaigns, but also the operating budget. So Amanda made a point that we could bring those two together, and that's really a way to approach this time. Let's see. The idea that there is a silver lining here, that normalcy will return. Those things kept coming up. And then another thing that I'm struck with this idea of pivot, but I would say pivot and I would add thrive. Pivot and thrive. That this can be an opportunity to thrive, even though it's quite an uncertain time. And our stakeholders, that we serve are hurting. Our communities are hurting. And yet there is some silver lining. Amanda or Tom, would you add any other highlights? And I do see we have a question, so I'll turn it over to either one of you, and then highlights.
I saw the question. The question was, we're in a different place than most agencies. We've been turned down by a number of grant requests due to COVID-19 needs in the community. What tips do you have for us? And I would say that I certainly have had some capital campaign projects in particular that the requests were put on hold because of more immediate interest in funding COVID. I also have had a couple projects which, quote, aren't basic need that have gotten funding from foundations. In fact, I was just on the phone this morning and a group really wants to move forward, a foundation wants to move forward with a $50,000 grant for that organization's capital project. So I think that there are still absolute funders and foundations who are looking at non-immediate COVID needs, but there are also a lot that have only decided to focus. So it really is, one, understanding what the foundation's current interest and need is, and two is with foundations, again, building a relationship with those foundations so that you can pick up the phone and you can talk to somebody at the foundation about your project. It's very hard to get it's hard to get funding in general from foundations if you're just another application in the pile. You have to build, just like we foster relationships with individuals, you need to foster those relationships with foundations. And who wouldn't want to foster a relationship with Tom Linfield? He's awesome. So give Tom a call. The other thing I would say is, again, individual donations, because individuals are giving to non-COVID related, or I would say organizations that are impacted by COVID, but aren't necessarily focused on emergency need. So again, just it's all about those individuals right now. Tom, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I'll say, I think much like the Great Recession, where we saw corporate funding go down the most and stay down the longest, followed by foundations who had lost lost money in the stock market. It was individuals who were giving the most and have the most potential. Frankly, individuals undergive right now, so I'm glad to see giving going up a little bit. I hope that trend continues, but that's where I would spend my time. This is a high school asking this question, so that's a good example of maybe trying to set up some Zoom calls and have some of your students or have some of your alumni talk about how you really changed their lives. This is an organization that is supposed to be transformative and alternative, so that's what I would use as your strength with individuals.
Any other questions? Oh, I do see, I have a couple. Let's see here. We have looking at different percentages of the generations who are giving, millennials, Gen X, boomers. Are there trends on how to approach each generation for giving during a time like this? For example, millennials enjoy snail mail versus boomers like phone calls, question mark. And then, so we got that one. And then I just want to put this one out there too. So after a campaign has lost momentum or paused due to the pandemic, what would be your advice to rebuild that momentum? So I think these are for you two.
Well, I'll jump on the first one simply because I love snail mail, and I'm a boomer, a cusp boomer. I will say, and even pre-COVID, I get many newsletters and I get many e-blasts. I get paper newsletters and paper e-blasts. The e-blast is so easy to delete because I get all of them. The paper ones, I cannot throw in the garbage without at least looking at the front and the back or leafing through it quickly. So I think there is something tangible. I think when your entire world is computer-based, I think everybody right now, right, that's all we do. We don't leave our rooms. We're stuck on the computer. Every conversation is on the computer. Everything is done by email. I think people are looking for other things. Yeah, phone calls. I don't know if it's generational. It may be. There were people who've written whole books about how you should approach generations differently. But I've even noticed in the generations that share my household, my kids have even started writing letters and connecting with people, and they're watching movies together online. So, it's about connectivity, and it's also about that individual donor. That's the other part about these relationships. Is it a donor who loves that kind of conversation, who would love if you went past their house and, left them a plant from your public garden? It's about the direct connectivity. I don't think there's kind of generational tricks. It's really about who the individual is.
And I completely agree with that. And I would say, don't focus on just one communication mode. This is a great example of why you should be making those phone calls. But like Tom says, also drop something in the mail to other donors, or in social media, consistently telling your story on social media is important too. So having some variety as best you can, knowing that resources are limited. The second question was about momentum. How do I build momentum after I've been on pause for a few months trying to figure out what's going to happen? That's a very good question. And I think many, if not most, sort of from just based on what I've been hearing, folks in capital campaigns are facing the same issue. And I think it goes back to really focusing on how your project is critical today and critical in the future. So, and Tom gave some really great messaging around that. And that's what I've been really recommending to my clients is, why is your project important in a post-COVID world? Is there a connection there? And what does that world look like? I mean, so we're so sick of the bad news of COVID, right? And so hearing some good news about what this will be like when we don't have to worry so much about COVID again, because that is a reality. This will end. And so I thought Tom's advice was great. And it's something I've been sharing with my clients as well, is what does that look like? And why is your project important during that time?
I would, if any of you were big Game of Thrones watchers, it was the most painful thing to wait a year, as they would each do each season. So I think if you get people excited about your project, it's okay that you are on hiatus. It's not like you were sitting around twiddling your thumbs. You were developing relationships, you were getting ready, you were doing the best planning you could, you're putting your best foot forward. I think that's the messaging, is here are the 10 things we're doing backstage so that we can put on the show that you've been anticipating.
And the one other thing I would also say is, I think that a month ago, it absolutely would have been harder to be talking about that post-COVID world, or thinking about anything beyond how do I homeschool my child? How do I deal with my home office? But now I definitely think we are all moving kind of beyond that. Things are starting to open up again. And so I definitely think there's now a window to start having those conversations again. People are ready for that. And in fact, I think they're hungry to start thinking about something other than COVID and their home office.
Okay, we have 2 questions, and we're gonna finish with those, but I will also put up how you can connect with the 3 of us here in just a minute, because we'd love to continue this conversation. Amanda, you heard Amanda's gonna be following up, and I will be following up with the video for all of you to share. So there is one question I'm gonna answer right away, and this is, do you have any funky ideas for hosting virtual fundraisers? I will say, the Milwaukee Youth Arts Center usually has their annual spring event, and they can only have 300 people. And this has always been a problem for them, because they touch so many lives with their performances and the students' families and on and on. This year they did it online, and they had 13,000 people. And what they did was a watch party where they had various performances from home, from parking lot, Tom, those sort of things. And I haven't heard the results of that, but wow, I mean, 300 to 13,000. I thought that was just kind of a phenomenal, and yeah, I would say funky kind of idea. So I'm gonna say that, and then the other question is, we'll just end with this. There's a specific question about sending out the personalized spring update to donors, talking about where we are, what we're doing, our impact, including a soft ask. However, Amanda, I believe it was you that said kind of there's something to avoid is that update piece. So this attendee would like to know, how might we proceed?
Yeah, good question. So when I was saying to avoid updating, I really more so meant in those personal one-on-one conversations that you're having with your donors. I think it's okay and great to send like a more mass email or mailer to update your audience on the work that you're doing, your response to COVID. But again, as Tom was saying, really focus those updates on your impact and let the people that you're helping tell your story of impact and update. Because I think it's most effective when you have pictures and stories and testimonials from the people that you're serving. And then you have like a bulleted list of the numbers, right? And we've served this many meals in the community during COVID. We plan on serving this many more. And I think also having your updates very forward focused, that we are moving on, and this is the impact we're about to have over the next 6 months. And if you want to get involved, we'd love to hear from you. And here's how you can get involved, and here's how you can help. And I think with some of those updates, again, I always hate to give too much advice when I don't know the specifics around the organization and the ask and the history, because that all is so important when giving out advice. But I would say in general, when you're doing these updates, it absolutely is important to include an ask. And so you'll just have to frame that ask in a way that makes sense for your organization. But a fairly direct ask this spring, I think, is important, and doing it in a forward-thinking, impact-based way is important.
Okay. So with that, I am just going to put up on the screen how you can contact us. And so I'll just do that as quick as I can here. Okay, so that is how you can contact us. And I want to thank you all. The response to this webinar was a signal to us that this is an important topic. And the variety, the diversity of programs and ideas and impact that have connected on this webinar alone is a real testament to the strength that our future holds with regard to what you're offering, the kind of impact you're having. So I just want to say thank you for all you do. Thank you for persevering through that. And we, the three of us, would love to connect with you and support you in your journey. Thank you so much.